The royal decree came at dawn, but by midday, the seventh caregiver was already fleeing the estate with claw marks bleeding through her sleeve. Alpha Cormac stood in the corridor outside his son's chambers, watching another failure run toward the gates, and the pack law was explicit. An heir to the throne who could not be tended was an heir who could not rule. 3 years old, and little Fiacre had already condemned 6 women to early retirement and 1 to the healing ward. The boy's legs didn't work the way other children's did. His words came in fractured whispers when they came at all, and his rage. His rage was pure alpha, distilled and untamed. Cormac's hands shook as he pressed them against the stone wall. 4 months until the council gathering. 4 months until they would demand to see his son walking, speaking, thriving. 4 months until they would invoke the ancient clause that had never been used in 5 generations. The removal of a defective heir. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will break your heart before it heals it. The forbidden bloodline wasn't supposed to matter anymore. Cormac had killed that part of his past the night he took the Alpha Oath, the night he swore before the assembled packs that he would never acknowledge the Omega who'd borne his child in secret, the Omega whose name he'd struck from every record, whose face he'd ordered forgotten. Ishling. Even thinking her name felt like swallowing glass. She'd been a servant in his father's house, and their affair had been the kind of scandal that toppled dynasties. Alpha blood mixing with Omega shame, creating a bond that pack law explicitly forbade for those of royal standing. When she'd told him she was pregnant, he'd done what every alpha was trained to do. He'd chosen power over love. He'd sent her away with enough gold to live comfortably in exile and a blood oath that she would never return, never claim the child, never speak his name in connection with hers. But Fiacre was hers too. That's what no one else knew. That's what made every caregiver's failure not just embarrassing but damning. The boy didn't just have his father's alpha rage. He had his mother's omega sensitivity, that bone-deep awareness of false connection, of people who touched him without meaning it. And every woman who'd tried to care for him had been hired, purchased, contracted. None of them wanted to be there. None of them saw him as anything more than a job, a title, a stepping stone to favor with the alpha. Fiacre knew. Even at 3, unable to walk steadily or speak clearly, he knew. The 8th caregiver arrived that evening. Murianne, she called herself, and she had the credentials of a royal nursemaid. Trained in the capital, certified by the Healers Guild, experienced with difficult children. She lasted 9 minutes. Cormac heard the screams from his study. Not hers but Fiacre's, that sound his son made when the world became too much, too sharp, too wrong. By the time he reached the nursery, Murianne was backing toward the door, her carefully arranged composure shattered, and Fiacre was on the floor. His small fists pounding the stone. His twisted legs folded beneath him at angles that made Cormac's chest constrict. "He's impossible," Murianne gasped. "I'm sorry, Alpha, but there's something wrong with him. Not just his body, his mind, his spirit. He won't let anyone close. He fights like he's being murdered when you try to help him stand, and when you speak to him gently he looks through you like you don't exist. Get out." Cormac's voice was glacier cold, alpha command wrapped around each syllable. Murianne fled without collecting her promised payment. Cormac lowered himself to the floor beside his son. Didn't touch him. Had learned months ago that Fiacre hated being touched when he was in this state, that it made everything worse, made the boy bite and scratch and scream until his voice went raw. So Cormac just sat there, 2 feet of distance between them, and waited. Always waiting. Always failing. "I don't know how to help you," he whispered. The words cracked on the way out. "I don't know what you need. I don't know why they all leave." Fiacre's hands stilled. His small face turned toward his father, and for just a moment, those eyes, omega blue Ashling's eyes, focused on him with heartbreaking clarity. Then the moment passed. Fiacre looked away and began to hum, that tuneless sound he made when he retreated into himself, and Cormac felt the failure settle deeper into his bones. The council wouldn't wait forever. Pack law was explicit. A disabled heir could rule, but only if they could function, only if they could be managed, only if they proved they weren't a liability to the succession. Every caregiver who fled was another mark against Fiachra's fitness. Another weight on the scale that would eventually tip toward disinheritance. Or worse. There were whispers, carefully hushed, never spoken in Cormac's presence, that perhaps the heir's disabilities were a sign. Curse. Divine disapproval of the bloodline. The old superstitions died hard in the northern packs, and Cormac had already caught 2 of his own counselors making the gesture against evil when they thought he wasn't looking. He couldn't lose his son. Not to the council's judgment, not to the pack's superstition, not to whatever darkness had made Fiachra this way, this beautiful, broken, unreachable way. But he was running out of options, running out of time, running out of caregivers willing to try. The pack's healer came to him 3 days later. Orlith was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes still sharp as winter stars. She found him in the training yard, working through sword forms with mechanical precision, trying to exhaust the panic that lived in his chest. "You need to bring her back," Orlith said without preamble. Cormac's blade stopped mid-swing. "What?" "The boy's mother. The Omega you exiled. Aisling." Orlith pronounced the name like it was sacred, like it hadn't been forbidden for 3 years. "You need to bring her back." The sword fell from Cormac's grip. "That's impossible." "The blood oath." "The blood oath was witnessed by your father's council, all of whom are now dead. The blood oath was your choice, not pack law. And the blood oath is killing your son." Orlith stepped closer, and for the first time in months, Cormac saw pity in someone's eyes. He knows Cormac. Somehow that boy knows he's missing something. Missing someone. He's rejecting every caregiver because none of them are her. That's not. He was barely a month old when she left. He can't remember. Omega bonds don't require memory. They require truth. Orlitha's hand found his shoulder, and her grip was surprisingly strong. "Every person you've brought to tend him has been a stranger pretending to love him for your sake. But Omega children can smell lies the way wolves smell blood. He's been waiting for someone who actually wants him. Someone who chose him. Someone whose presence would destroy everything I've built." Cormac pulled away from her touch, his voice rising. "Do you understand what you're asking? If I bring Aisling back, if I acknowledge her, acknowledge what she is to him, the council will have grounds to challenge my entire rule. They'll claim I violated pack law, that I kept an Omega consort in secret, that my heir is illegitimate." "Your heir is dying inside," Orlith interrupted, and her voice cracked like thunder. "I've been healing for 60 years, boy, and I've never seen a child suffer like yours is suffering. He's not just disabled. He's starving. Starving for the bond you cut when you sent his mother away. And no caregiver, no matter how skilled, will ever be able to fill that void." Cormac turned away from her. Looked at the sky, the mountains, the borders of his territory. Everything he'd sacrificed for. Everything that would crumble if he made this choice. "She took the blood oath too," he said quietly. "She swore never to return. Even if I wanted to. Then break the oath. Bleed for it if you have to. But save your son before it's too late." Orlith left him there, standing in the training yard with his sword on the ground and his world tilting toward collapse. That night Cormac wrote the letter. Sealed it with his personal sigil. Gave it to his most trusted courier with instructions that would amount to treason if anyone discovered them. "Find Aisling. Wherever she is. Whatever she's doing. Bring her this. Tell her I'm begging." The courier left at dawn. Cormac didn't tell anyone. Didn't prepare his council. Didn't warn the pack. Just waited, watching Fiachra retreat further into himself each day, watching the calendar count down toward the council gathering, watching everything he'd built balance on the edge of a decision he'd made in fear 3 years ago. 7 days passed. The 9th caregiver arrived. An elder from the southern packs, famous for her gentle ways with difficult children. She lasted 3 hours before Fiachra bit her hand hard enough to draw blood, and she left cursing both father and son. 9 days. Fiachra stopped eating. just turned his face away from every meal, his small body growing thinner, his eyes growing more distant. The healers tried everything. Nothing worked. It was like he'd decided to fade away, and no force in the world could convince him otherwise. 11 days. Cormac held his son and felt him go limp in his arms, felt the way the boy's body had stopped fighting everything, stopped fighting anything, just surrendered to the inevitability of being unwanted and unhelped and utterly alone despite being surrounded by people every moment of his life. "Please," Cormac whispered into his son's hair. "Please hold on. Please." Fiachra didn't respond. Didn't even hum anymore. On the 12th day, Aisling came home. She appeared in the courtyard without fanfare, without announcement, just a slim figure in a travel-stained cloak stepping through the gates like she'd never left. Cormac was in the great hall when the guards brought him word, and for a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't reconcile the impossible thing that was happening. "She says you sent for her," the guard reported, confusion clear in his voice. "She says, Alpha, she says she's the boy's mother." The great hall went silent. Every counselor, every pack member present, every servant within earshot froze and stared at Cormac, waiting for him to deny it. Rage. To have the Omega arrested for speaking madness. Instead, Cormac stood. "Bring her to me." The whispers started immediately. He could hear them, feel them, sense the way his authority cracked with those 4 words. But he didn't care. Couldn't care. Not when Fiachra was upstairs fading like a candle in the wind. Not when this might be the only chance. Aisling entered the hall, and time folded in on itself. She looked older, thinner. Her omega blue eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, and her hands trembled as she lowered her hood. But she was still beautiful. Still the woman he'd loved and betrayed. Still the woman whose absence had haunted him every single day for 3 years. "Alpha Cormac," she said formally, and even her voice was different. Harder, colder, carved from the same pain he carried. "You summoned me." "I did." His own voice sounded distant to his ears. "My son needs you." "Your son." Her laugh was bitter. "Is that what we're calling him now?" "Aisling." "No." She stepped forward, and he saw the fury beneath her exhaustion, the rage she'd been carrying in exile. "You don't get to use my name. You don't get to pretend this is some kind of reconciliation. You sent me away, Cormac. You chose your throne over our child. You made me swear a blood oath never to see him, never to hold him, never to be his mother. And now what? He's inconvenient, difficult. So you summon me back like I'm another servant you can hire and dismiss." The hall was utterly silent. Every word she spoke was sedition, pack law violation, grounds for immediate exile or worse. But no one moved. No one dared breathe. "He's dying," Cormac said simply. "Without you, he's dying." Aisling's anger cracked. Just for a moment, he saw the fear underneath, the desperate love she'd been choking on for 3 years. "Take me to him." Cormac led her through the halls and behind them. He could hear his world beginning to collapse. The counselor's urgent whispers, the guards' confused questions, the sound of scandal spreading like wildfire through the estate. He'd destroyed his credibility in a single moment. Proven every whispered accusation true. Revealed the lie he'd been living. None of it mattered. They reached Fiachra's chambers. The current healer, a young man named Cathair, looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he recognized what Aisling must be. "Out!" Cormac commanded. Cathair fled. Fiachra was in his bed, small and still beneath the covers. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at the ceiling like he could see something beyond it. He didn't react when the door opened, didn't turn toward his father's voice. But when Aisling stepped forward, when she moved into his line of sight, the boy's eyes focused, sharpened, fixed on her face with an intensity that made Cormac's breath catch. "Fiachra," Aisling whispered, and her voice broke completely. "Oh, my baby. My beautiful boy. I'm here. I'm so sorry, but I'm here now." She reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving the boy every chance to reject her the way he'd rejected everyone else. Her hand trembled as it moved toward his. Fiachra stared at her. At this stranger who somehow wasn't a stranger. At this Omega whose scent must have been buried so deep in his earliest memories that he couldn't consciously recall it but recognized it anyway. Recognized it the way a wolf recognizes the moon. His small hand lifted from the covers, reached out, and took hers. The sound Aisling made was pure anguish and relief combined, a sob that tore from her chest as she collapsed to her knees beside the bed, clutching their son's hand like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. Fiachra didn't pull away, didn't bite or scratch or scream, just held on, his blue eyes never leaving her face. His small body relaxing for the first time in months. "Mama," he whispered. The first clear word he'd spoken in weeks. Mama came back. Aisling pressed her forehead to their joined hands and wept. Cormac stood frozen in the doorway, watching the reunion he'd prevented for 3 years, and felt something inside him shatter. This was what he'd denied them. What he'd denied himself. This moment, this bond, this proof that Fiachra wasn't broken or cursed or damaged. He was just a child who'd been missing his mother and hadn't known how to explain it, hadn't had the words or the understanding, just the bone-deep knowledge that something essential was gone and everyone trying to replace it was. Wrong, wrong, wrong. "I'm not leaving again," Aisling was whispering. "Never again. Promise. Promise, Fiachra. Mama's staying." She looked up at Cormac then, and her eyes were fierce through the tears. "Whatever happens, whatever the pack does, I'm not leaving him. If they exile me, they'll have to exile him too, and I'll take him gladly. But I'm not walking away again. Not for your throne, not for pack law, not for anything." Cormac nodded slowly. "I know. Do you?" She stood, still holding Fiachra's hand, and faced him fully. "Because the moment word spreads, and it's spreading right now, your council is going to demand answers. They're going to invoke pack law. They're going to use this to challenge everything. Your rule, your heir, your fitness as Alpha. And you're going to have to choose, Cormac. Right now. This moment. Are you going to send me away again to save your throne? Or are you going to fight for your son?" The question hung between them like a blade. Behind him, Cormac could hear footsteps in the corridor. Urgent. Multiple people. His counselors coming to demand an explanation, to invoke the very laws Aisling had just predicted. He looked at his son. At the boy who'd stopped fading, who was holding his mother's hand and breathing normally for the first time in days. At the proof that this bond, this love, this forbidden connection, was the only thing that had ever mattered. "I choose him," Cormac said. "I choose both of you. Whatever it costs." The footsteps stopped outside the door. Someone knocked. 3 sharp raps that spoke of authority and anger. "Alpha Cormac," called the voice of Declan, his head counselor. "We need to speak with you. Immediately. About the Omega." Aisling's hand tightened on Fiachra's. "Here we go." Cormac turned toward the door, squaring his shoulders. "Enter." Declan swept in, followed by 4 other senior counselors. All of them stopped short when they saw Aisling, saw her standing beside the heir's bed, holding the boy's hand. Confirmation of every rumor, every scandal, every violation of pack law they'd feared. "Alpha," Declan's voice was carefully controlled. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," Cormac said, "is that my son's mother has come home. Her presence here violates the blood oath both of you swore. It violates pack law regarding Alpha consorts. It calls into question the heir's legitimacy. It saves my son's life." Cormac's Alpha command rolled through the words, making Declan stumble back a step. "Look at him. He's holding her hand." He called her Mama. "He's been rejecting every caregiver because none of them were her. And I will not send her away again." "Then you're choosing to destroy your own rule," another counselor, Reardon, stepped forward, his voice hard. "The moment this becomes public knowledge, the other packs will demand a council review. They'll claim you've been harboring a forbidden Omega consort. They'll challenge Fiachra's right to inherit. Let them challenge, Cormac interrupted. Let them review. Let them demand whatever answers they want. But Aisling stays. Fiachra keeps his mother. That's not negotiable. You're risking civil war over an Omega, Declan said, and there was something like pity in his voice. Over a servant you should have forgotten years ago. Is she really worth destroying everything your family has built? Before Cormac could respond, Aisling spoke. Ask your Alpha, she said quietly, whether his son is worth it, because that's what this is actually about. Not me. That little boy who's been suffering because his father was too afraid to break the rules that were killing him. Declan's eyes narrowed. You would use the heir's condition to. I would use the truth, Aisling interrupted, and her Omega voice carried unexpected steel. Fiachra doesn't need another healer. He doesn't need another trained caregiver. He needs his mother. He needed her 3 years ago, and he needs her now, and if your pack law says that's wrong, then your pack law is what's broken, not my son. Your son, Reardon repeated. You admit it, then. That you broke the blood oath by claiming him. I admit, Aisling said, that I love him more than I fear your laws. And if loving my child is treason, then execute me for it. But you'll do it while I'm holding his hand, and you'll do it in front of him, and you'll be the ones who have to live with making that choice. The councillors looked at Cormac, waiting for him to control his Omega, to reassert authority, to remind everyone who was Alpha here. Instead, Cormac moved to stand beside Aisling. Not touching her, but close enough that the message was clear. She's right, he said. I've spent 3 years following pack law, and it's accomplished nothing except making my son suffer. So here's the new law. Aisling stays. She's Fiachra's primary caregiver, effective immediately. She'll have rooms in the family wing, full access to the heir, and anyone who objects can take it up with me directly. This is madness, Declan breathed. The council will. The council will do what councils always do, Cormac cut him off. They'll argue and debate and threaten, but they won't remove me. Not while I'm standing. And they won't touch my son or his mother. Not while I'm breathing. You're banking everything on the assumption that the other Alphas won't unite against you, Reardon said. That's a losing bet, Cormac. The moment they smell weakness, then they'll find me waiting. Cormac's voice dropped to alpha rumble, making every wolf in the room straighten unconsciously. I'm done sacrificing my family for politics. Done pretending that following every ancient law makes me a good Alpha. I'd rather be a good father. And if that costs me the throne, so be it. Silence. Thick and heavy and charged with the weight of a declaration that couldn't be taken back. Finally, Declan inclined his head. So be it then. I'll inform the pack. And I'll begin preparations for the council challenge. 'Cause it's coming, Alpha. Within the week, I'd wager. And when it does, you'll need to defend not just this choice, but every choice you've made since taking power. I'm aware. The councillors filed out, their disapproval palpable. Only Declan paused at the door, looking back at the 3 of them, Alpha, Omega, and the child they'd created in defiance of everything. I hope he's worth it, Declan said softly. I truly do. Then he was gone and they were alone. Aisling's composure cracked. She swayed on her feet, and Cormac caught her elbow before she could collapse. She didn't pull away from his touch this time, just leaned into it slightly, exhausted beyond measure. I meant what I said, she whispered. I'm not leaving him. Not for anything. I know. Cormac's thumb traced unconscious circles on her arm. I'm not asking you to. What if they force you to choose? What if the council? Then I already made my choice. He looked at Fiachra, at their son who'd finally stopped fighting the world long enough to rest peacefully. I chose wrong once. 3 years ago. I'm not doing it again. Aisling turned to face him fully, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw something other than anger or exhaustion in her eyes. Something that might have been hope carefully guarded. You really mean it, she said. You'd give up the throne. I'd give up anything, Cormac corrected, to see him look at me the way he's looking at you right now. The moment stretched between them, heavy with 3 years of grief and regret and the impossible possibility that maybe they could find their way back to each other. Then Fiachra stirred, his small voice cutting through the tension. "Mama. Hungry." Aisling laughed, a broken, beautiful sound, and turned back to their son. "Then let's get you something to eat, baby. What do you want?" And for the first time in months, Fiachra answered with actual words instead of screams or humming or silence. He told her about porridge, about honey, about the way Cook made bread that was soft enough for him to manage. He talked, and Aisling listened like every word was precious, and Cormac watched them and felt his heart stitch itself back together in a way he hadn't known was possible. This was what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away for the sake of propriety and power, and the approval of men who'd never loved anyone the way he loved this woman, this child. Never again. The next morning, the pack gathered in the great hall. Summoned by Declan's urgent messages, every ranking member present, every household head, every warrior who'd sworn fealty to Cormac's line. They stood in rigid silence as Cormac took his place on the Alpha's dais, and beside him, not behind, not hidden, stood Aisling with Fiachra in her arms. The boy looked better already. His color improved, his eyes brighter. His small hand wrapped securely around his mother's neck. He buried his face against her shoulder when the crowd stared, but he didn't scream, didn't fight. Just clung to her and let her be his shield. "You all know why I've called this assembly," Cormac began. His voice carried through the hall, alpha strong despite the fear coiled in his gut. "By now you've all heard the rumors. The Omega who stands beside me is Aisling. She is Fiachra's mother. She has been since his birth. And I have asked her to return as his caregiver, despite the blood oath we both swore 3 years ago." The murmurs started immediately. Shock, anger, confusion rippling through the assembled pack. "This violates pack law," someone called from the back. "You can't just." "I can," Cormac interrupted. "And I have. Pack law exists to serve the pack, not to destroy it. And forcing my son to suffer because I was too proud to acknowledge his mother serves no one. It serves our traditions." Reardon stepped forward from the crowd. "It serves the laws that keep our hierarchy stable, that prevent chaos and scandal and the breakdown of proper order. You're asking us to accept that an alpha, a royal alpha, can take an omega consort in secret, produce an heir, and face no consequences. What message does that send?" "It sends the message," Aisling spoke up, her voice steady, "that children matter more than politics. That a parent's duty to their child supersedes their duty to tradition. And that maybe, just maybe, some of your laws need to change." The hall erupted. Voices raised in argument, in protest, in shocked denial that an Omega would dare speak in formal assembly. Cormac felt the control slipping, felt the pack fracturing in real time, and knew he was seconds away from chaos. Then Fiachra moved. The boy lifted his head from Aisling's shoulder and looked out at the assembled pack. His blue eyes, Omega eyes undeniably, scanned the crowd with that unsettling intensity he sometimes had, that sense that he understood far more than a 3-year-old should. "Stop yelling," he said. His voice was small but clear. "You're scaring Mama." The hall went silent. Every eye fixed on the heir who'd never spoken in public before, who most of them had only ever heard screaming or seen being carried, limp and unresponsive, through the estate. "Mama's staying," Fiachra continued. His small hand patted Aisling's cheek, gentle and possessive at once. "She makes me better. Father said she could stay. So she's staying." The simplicity of it, the pure, uncomplicated logic of a child who only understood that the world was wrong before and right now, cut through the political maneuvering like a blade through silk. Orlith, the ancient healer, stepped forward from the crowd. "The boy's right. I've been tending him for months, watching him decline no matter what we tried. 3 days with his mother, and he's eating, speaking, sleeping peacefully. Whatever laws we think we're upholding, they're less important than that. Laws aren't suggestions," Reardon protested. If we let one alpha break them, then we have a conversation about whether the laws still serve us, Orlith interrupted. Her age gave her the right to speak over even senior counselors. I remember when we changed the laws about Omega education, about mixed pack marriages, about inheritance through female lines. Every time people like you said the sky would fall. Never did. The pack adapted, grew stronger for it. This is different, Declan said, but his voice lacked conviction. This is the Alpha's heir. The succession itself is in question. Is it? Orlith gestured at Fiachra. He's Cormac's son. That's not in dispute. He's the rightful heir. The only question is whether his mother's bloodline, her Omega status, somehow disqualifies him. And I'd like to hear someone explain to me why it should. Why a child should be punished for the circumstances of his birth. No one answered. Because the truth was, there was no good answer. Pack law forbade Alpha-Omega bonds at the royal level not because of any rational reason, but because of tradition, superstition, the old fear that Omega blood would weaken the ruling line. Looking at Fiachra, strong-willed, fierce, undeniably alpha in his own way despite his disabilities, that fear seemed absurd. I move, Orlith continued, that the pack accept Aisling as the heir's caregiver and mother, that we acknowledge Fiachra's legitimacy regardless of his bloodline, and that we present a unified front to the council when they inevitably come to challenge us. Because if we turn on ourselves now, we guarantee our weakness. But if we stand together, we might just change pack law for the better. A long moment of silence. Then, one by one, pack members began to murmur agreement. Not everyone. Reardon and several others stood stone-faced, but enough. Enough that Cormac felt the tide turning. Felt the possibility that they might actually survive this. All in favor, he called. Make it known. The majority of the hall raised their hands. Not unanimous but solid. Mandate. Then it's done, Cormac said. Aisling is recognized as Fiachra's mother and primary caregiver. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to leave the pack. No hard feelings. But if you stay, you accept this decision and support it when the council comes calling. 3 wolves left. Just 3 out of nearly 100 present. Reardon wasn't among them. He stayed, though his expression made clear this wasn't over. The assembly dispersed, and Cormac felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning. That night, after Fiachra was asleep, Cormac found Aisling in the gardens. She was sitting on the stone bench where they used to meet in secret, 3 years ago when the world was simpler and their love felt like the only thing that mattered. You should be resting, he said softly. She looked up at him, and in the moonlight, she looked so much like the girl he'd fallen in love with that his chest ached. I can't sleep. Keep waiting for someone to come tell me it was all a mistake, that I have to leave again. That's not happening. He sat beside her, careful to maintain space between them. I meant what I said. You're staying. Both of you. The council will come. Will demand explanations. Will probably try to force me to make impossible choices. Cormac looked at the stars, at the vast night sky that had witnessed so many of his failures. But I'm done letting them dictate what matters. Done choosing power over the people I love. Aisling was quiet for a long moment. Then, you really love him, Fiachra. I thought maybe you just saw him as an heir. Duty. But you actually love him. He's my son. Cormac's voice cracked. Of course I love him. I just didn't know how to reach him. Didn't know I was the problem. That sending you away had broken something in him that I couldn't fix on my own. You weren't the only problem, Aisling said softly. I left too. I took the blood oath too. I chose exile over fighting for him. We both failed him, Cormac. We both let fear win. Then we both need to do better. He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the years of pain etched in her face. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. But I am asking you to let me try to make it right. For his sake, if not for ours. For his sake, Aisling agreed. That's the only reason I'm here. The only reason I'm willing to share space with you after what you put me through. I understand. Do you? Her voice hardened. Do you understand what it was like carrying your child, giving birth alone, having exactly 4 weeks with him before you ripped him from my arms? Do you understand the nights I spent wondering if he was okay, if he was happy, if he even remembered my scent? The times I almost broke the oath, almost showed up here and damned the consequences. No. Cormac's throat was tight. I don't understand. Can't. But I am sorry. For all of it. Sorry doesn't heal him, Aisling said. Only being here does. I'll stay. I'll love him. I'll help him grow into whoever he's meant to be. But you and we're not going back to what we were. That's dead. You killed it when you chose your throne. The words landed like physical blows, but Cormac accepted them. Deserved them. I know. They sat in silence after that, the space between them filled with everything they couldn't say, everything they'd lost, everything that might never be repaired. Inside the estate, their son slept peacefully for the first time in months, wrapped in blankets that smelled like his mother, finally home. The council arrived on the 7th day. Not the full gathering that would take weeks to assemble, but an advance delegation. 5 alphas from neighboring territories, each one powerful in their own right, each one carrying the authority to investigate, question, and recommend sanctions. They came with their own warriors, their own advisors, their own barely concealed hostility. Cormac met them in the formal receiving hall, Declan and his remaining counselors arrayed behind him. Aisling was conspicuously absent. He'd insisted she stay with Fiachra, keep the boy calm and sheltered from what was about to happen. The lead alpha was Lorcan, an old guard traditionalist whose territory bordered Cormac's to the east. He was gray-haired, hard-eyed, and built like a mountain. His reputation for ruthless enforcement of pack law preceded him. Alpha Cormac, Lorcan's voice filled the hall. We've come in response to the reports that have reached the council. Reports of blood oath violations, forbidden Omega consorts, questions regarding the heir's legitimacy and fitness to rule. I trust you understand the severity of these accusations. I understand, Cormac said evenly. And I'm prepared to answer any questions you have. Then let's begin with the simple facts. Lorcan stepped forward, his presence deliberately intimidating. Is it true that you fathered a child with an Omega servant 3 years ago, in direct violation of the royal bloodline protocols? Yes. The admission sent ripples through the assembled wolves. No denial, no attempt to soften the truth. And is it true that you sent this Omega into exile under a blood oath, separating her from the child? Yes. And is it further true that you have now violated that blood oath by summoning her back and installing her as the heir's caregiver? Yes. Cormac met Lorcan's eyes steadily. All of that is true. Then you admit to 3 separate violations of pack law. Lorcan's voice was almost triumphant. The unauthorized breeding with an Omega of servant class, the abuse of blood oath protocols, and the subsequent breaking of that same oath. Any one of these would be grounds for sanction. All 3 together make a compelling case for removal from the alpha position. They would, Cormac agreed, if pack law existed in a vacuum. But it doesn't. It exists to serve the pack's well-being. And my son's well-being required his mother's return. Your son's alleged disabilities do not override centuries of tradition, another alpha, Neov from the Southern Territories, spoke up. We sympathize with any parent's struggle, but personal hardship cannot be allowed to erode the foundations of our society. If we permit you this exception, what prevents every alpha from claiming similar justification for breaking whatever laws inconvenience them? The difference, Declan interjected carefully, is that this isn't convenience. The heir was deteriorating. Multiple healers documented his decline. We tried everything within pack law to help him, and nothing worked. His mother's presence was the only thing that stabilized him. So you claim, Lorcan said. But we have only your word. The word of wolves who clearly have incentive to justify this violation. Then examine him yourself, Cormac offered. Speak to our healers. Review the medical records. Watch Fiacre with and without his mother present, if you doubt the necessity. We intend to do exactly that, Niamh said. But even if we accept that the child benefits from his mother's presence, that doesn't excuse your original violation. Fathering a child with a servant Omega and attempting to hide the connection. I'm not trying to excuse it, Cormac said quietly. I was wrong. I let fear and pride dictate my choices, and my son suffered for it. I'm not asking you to overlook what I did 3 years ago. I'm asking you to consider what's best for him now. Today. Going forward. What's best for one child cannot supersede what's best for the entire pack structure, Lorcan countered. If we allow this, we set a precedent that will undermine Alpha authority across all territories. Or, Orlitha's voice rang out from the back of the hall, you set a precedent that pack law can evolve when it fails to serve its purpose. The ancient healer moved through the crowd with surprising speed, coming to stand beside Cormac. Her presence commanded respect even from these powerful alphas. She was older than any of them, had served longer, had seen more cycles of leadership than most wolves experienced in a lifetime. Alpha Lorcan, she continued. I've been a healer for 6 decades. I've tended 3 generations of leaders across multiple packs. And I've never seen a child suffer the way Fiacre was suffering, not from his physical disabilities, but from the forced separation from his mother. We were watching him fade, die inside if not in body. And we were powerless to stop it because pack law told us the solution was forbidden. The law exists for good reason, Lorcan said, but his voice was less certain now. Does it? Or does it exist because it's always existed, and we're too afraid to question it? Orlith moved closer to him, her small frame somehow making him seem less imposing. The prohibition on Alpha-Omega royal bonds came from a time when we believed Omega blood was weak, that it would dilute the Alpha line. But look around this room. How many of you have Omega grandparents? Great-grandparents? How many can truly claim pure Alpha heritage going back more than a handful of generations? Silence. Because she was right. Bloodlines had always been more mixed than the official histories acknowledged. Fiacre is strong, Orlith continued. His disabilities are physical, not spiritual. His will is pure Alpha. His connection to pack bonds undeniable. The only thing wrong with him is that he was separated from his mother at the most crucial stage of development. And now that she's returned, he's thriving, eating, speaking, engaging with the world. If that's not proof that our laws failed him, I don't know what is. A third Alpha, Aemon from the northern reaches, spoke up. Even accepting all of that, there's still the matter of the deception. Alpha Cormac hid the child's true parentage. That's not just a violation of protocol, it's a betrayal of trust. How can we rely on an Alpha who lies about something so fundamental? You can't, Cormac admitted, and the honesty of it seemed to surprise them. I lied. I hid the truth. I prioritized my reputation over my son's needs, and I was wrong. If you want to sanction me for that, I'll accept it. Remove me from certain councils, reduce my voting authority, whatever you deem appropriate. But don't punish Fiacre. Don't force him back into the suffering he endured before his mother returned. He's innocent in all of this. But his legitimacy as heir is now in question, Niamh pressed. If we acknowledge him as the product of a forbidden union, then we acknowledge that forbidden unions can produce perfectly legitimate heirs, Orlith interrupted. Which might actually be good for the pack as a whole. How many talented wolves never lead because their bloodlines aren't pure enough? How much potential do we waste on outdated prejudices? The delegation exchanged glances. This was clearly not going the way they'd expected. Instead of a simple case of lawbreaking to be punished, they were being forced to confront the validity of the laws themselves. We need to see the child, Lorcan said finally. Interview the mother. Speak with the healers independently. And then we'll make our recommendation to the full council. Of course, Cormac agreed. Though I ask that you be gentle with Fiacre. He's had a difficult few months, and he's still learning to trust people. We're not monsters, Niamh said, though her tone suggested she thought Cormac might be. We'll conduct our investigation fairly. The next 2 days were excruciating. The delegation moved through the estate like a storm, questioning everyone, examining every record, observing Fiacre from a distance before finally requesting a formal meeting with him and Aisling. Cormac wanted to be present, but Lorcan insisted the interview be conducted without the Alpha's potentially coercive presence. So he waited in the corridor outside Fiacre's chambers, pacing like a caged wolf while 5 strange Alphas questioned his son and the woman he'd exiled. Inside, Aisling held Fiacre on her lap and tried to keep her voice steady as the interrogation began. "Your name is Aisling?" Lorcan asked, his tone more gentle than she'd expected. "Yes, Alpha. And you are this child's mother?" "Yes. Can you describe the circumstances of his birth?" Aisling took a breath. This was the part where she could either protect Cormac or tell the full, damning truth. He chose truth. "I was a servant in the previous Alpha's household. Cormac and I had an affair, one that I initiated, one that he tried to resist because he knew it violated protocol. When I became pregnant, he was horrified. Not because he didn't want the child, but because he knew what it would mean for his position, for his future as Alpha. His father had just died. The pack was in transition. Acknowledging an Omega consort would have destroyed his claim to leadership. So he sent you away," Niamh said. "He gave me a choice," Aisling corrected. "Exile with enough gold to live comfortably or stay and watch him lose everything. His throne, his authority, possibly his life if the more traditional factions decided to remove him. Chose exile. For him. For the pack. For our son, who would have been trapped in the middle of a civil war. A convenient narrative," Eamon said skeptically. "But it casts you both as victims of circumstance rather than perpetrators of deception." "We were both," Aisling said simply. "Victims and perpetrators. We made choices that seemed necessary at the time, and those choices hurt people. Hurt our son most of all. I'm not asking you to excuse that. I'm just telling you how it happened." Lorcan leaned forward, his eyes on Fiacre. "And the boy? How has he adjusted to your presence? See for yourself." Aisling loosened her hold slightly, giving the delegation a clear view of how Fiacre was draped across her, completely relaxed, playing with a wooden toy she'd carved for him. "Before I came back, he wouldn't let anyone touch him. Wouldn't speak. Barely ate. Now he's talking in sentences, eating 3 meals a day, sleeping through the night. His physical therapy is progressing because he trusts me to help him practice walking. He's still disabled, that hasn't changed and won't change. But he's not suffering anymore. May I?" Niamh gestured toward Fiacre, asking permission to come closer. Aisling felt Fiacre tense against her. "You can try, but he doesn't like strangers." Niamh approached slowly, crouching to be at eye level with the boy. "Hello, Fiacre. My name is Niamh. I'm here to talk with your mother for a bit. Is that okay?" Fiacre stared at her with those unsettling blue eyes. Then he looked up at Aisling. "She's checking." "Yes, baby. She's checking to make sure you're okay." "I'm okay now. Mama's here." Fiacre returned his attention to his toy, dismissing the strange Alpha with the casual indifference of a child who felt secure. Niamh's expression softened slightly. She stood, backing away to give the boy space. "He seems healthy. Content." "He is," Aisling said. Finally. The interview continued for another hour, covering everything from Fiacre's birth to his current routines, from Aisling's years in exile to her plans for his future care. By the end, even Lorcan seemed less hostile, though his expression remained carefully neutral. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said formally. "We'll need to deliberate before making our recommendation." They left, and Aisling finally allowed herself to shake, the fear and stress of the interrogation catching up with her all at once. Fiacre felt it immediately, his small hand patting her arm. "Mama okay?" "Yes, baby. Mama's okay. She kissed his forehead. Just tired. Cormac entered moments later, his expression desperate. How did it go? I don't know, Aisling admitted. They were less hostile than I expected. But that doesn't mean anything. They could still recommend removing you. Removing both of us. They won't take you from him again, Cormac said fiercely. I won't let them. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat. I'll fight them if I have to. I'll challenge them. You'll do what's best for Fiachra, Aisling interrupted. Even if that means stepping aside. Even if that means accepting sanctions. You don't get to start a war over this, Cormac. Not when our son would be caught in the middle. Our son, Cormac repeated softly. You called him our son. That's what he is. Aisling's voice was tired. Has been from the beginning. I'm done pretending otherwise. The delegation's verdict came that evening. The entire pack was summoned to the Great Hall once again, and the tension was suffocating as Lorcan stood before them all. We have completed our investigation, he began, his voice carrying to every corner. And we have come to several conclusions. First, Alpha Cormac did indeed violate pack law 3 years ago by engaging in a forbidden relationship and attempting to conceal the resulting heir. Second, the blood oath was mutually agreed upon but ultimately harmful to the child's well-being. Third, the current arrangement, while technically a violation of that oath, serves the child's best interests. Hope flickered in Cormac's chest. Dangerous hope. Therefore, Lorcan continued, we make the following recommendations to the full council. Alpha Cormac should face formal censure for his deception, a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a temporary reduction in his council voting authority. The Omega Aisling should be granted official status as the heir's caregiver and mother, with all rights and protections that entails. And young Fiachra should be acknowledged as the legitimate heir, regardless of his mother's bloodline. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. This was more lenient than anyone had expected. However, Lorcan raised his voice over the noise. These recommendations come with conditions. Alpha Cormac must undergo a formal review at the next full council gathering. His fitness to lead will be evaluated based on his actions over the coming months. And the laws regarding Alpha-Omega royal bonds must be formally debated and potentially revised to prevent future cases like this. The old ways are clearly failing us. It's time we acknowledged that. Cormac felt his knees go weak with relief. It wasn't a complete vindication. The censure would sting, the review would be stressful, and his authority was definitely compromised. But Aisling could stay. Fiachra was safe. They had a chance. Do you accept these terms? Lorcan asked him directly. Yes, Cormac said without hesitation. Completely. Then we're done here. Expect formal documents within the week. Lorcan's expression was still stern, but there was something else there now. Perhaps respect, perhaps just acknowledgement that Cormac had been willing to sacrifice everything for his child. And Alpha Cormac, don't make us regret showing mercy. You won't, Cormac promised. I swear it. The delegation departed the next morning, and the estate slowly began to breathe again. The crisis had passed. Not perfectly, not without cost, but they'd survived. Fiachra would keep his mother. Cormac would keep his throne, albeit with reduced power. And the pack would have to reckon with the reality that their laws had nearly destroyed an innocent child. Change was coming. Slowly, painfully, but coming. That night, Aisling found Cormac in the gardens again. Their spot. The place where everything had begun and nearly ended. The delegation seemed impressed with Fiachra, she said, sitting beside him. Niev told me privately that his strength of will reminded her of the ancient Alphas, the ones who led through force of personality rather than just bloodline. He has your strength, Cormac said. Your resilience. He survived my mistakes because of you. Our mistakes, Aisling corrected. I keep telling you we both failed him. We both have to do better. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night air cool against their skin. "I know you said what we had is dead," Cormac finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I respect that. Do. But I want you to know. It's not dead for me. Never was. Every day you were gone, I regretted sending you away. Every time I looked at Fiacra and saw your eyes, I hated myself a little more. And now that you're back, now that I see you with him, see the way you've brought him back to life. Don't." Aisling's voice was rough. "Don't do this, Cormac. Don't confuse gratitude with love. Don't mistake relief with—" "I'm not confused," he interrupted. "I know exactly what I feel. What I've always felt. I love you, Aisling. I loved you 3 years ago, I loved you every day you were gone, and I love you now. And I know I have no right to say that, no right to ask you to feel anything other than hatred for me, but I need you to know. Before we settle into whatever this new arrangement is, I need you to know that I'm still in love with you." Aisling turned to look at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You broke my heart, Cormac. Shattered it. Sent me away from my child and made me swear never to come back. Do you understand how hard it was to stay away? How many times I almost broke that oath? How many nights I cried myself to sleep wondering if he was okay, if he remembered me, if he thought I'd abandoned him? I know. I'm so—" "Let me finish." Her voice cracked. "You broke my heart, but you also gave me the most beautiful thing in my life. Your son. And you brought me back when he needed me, even though it cost you everything. You chose him over your throne, over your reputation, over everything you'd built. And that means something. It means I finally got one thing right," Cormac said bitterly. "It means maybe you're capable of doing better, of being better." Aisling wiped her eyes roughly. "I'm not ready to forgive you. I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm willing to try to move forward. For Fiacra. And maybe eventually for us. That's more than I deserve. Probably." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "But he deserves a family. Real one. Not just 2 parents who tolerate each other for his sake. So we're going to work at this. We're going to try. And if we fail, if we can't get past what happened, at least we'll know we tried." Cormac reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. Her fingers were cold, and they trembled in his grip, but she held on. "I'll spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make this right," he promised. "Every single day." "Good," Aisling said. "Because you owe me about 3 years' worth of apologies. This is just the beginning." They sat there as the moon rose higher, hands clasped, the future uncertain but finally within reach. Inside the estate, Fiacra slept peacefully, wrapped in blankets that smelled like both his parents now. He dreamed of walking without falling, of words that came easily, of a world where everyone stayed instead of leaving. He dreamed of family. The next morning, Cormac woke to chaos. Shouting in the courtyard, the sound of horses, urgent footsteps in the corridors. He dressed quickly and found Declan waiting outside his chambers, the councillor's face grim. "What's happened?" "Riders from the eastern border," Declan said. "There's been an attack. Rogue wolves, possibly from one of the territories that opposed the delegation's ruling. They're testing your authority, Cormac. Seeing if the censure makes you weak enough to challenge." Cormac's blood ran cold. "How many?" "A dozen killed 3 of our border guards and destroyed an entire settlement before fleeing back across the territorial line. They left a message." Declan handed him a blood-stained piece of parchment. The words were scrawled in rough script. "Weak alphas breed weak heirs. Your omega-tainted bloodline has no place on the throne. Abdicate or watch your pack burn." "Reardon," Cormac breathed. "It has to be. He was the only one who—" "We don't know that for certain," Declan cautioned. "But the timing is suspicious. He left the pack the day the delegation announced its ruling. He had time to cross into Eastern Territory and gather support from traditionalist factions. Then we need to respond. Before this spreads. Cormac's mind was already racing through strategies, resources, potential allies. Call the War Council. Mobilize our border patrols. And send word to the territories who supported us. We need to know if they're facing similar attacks. Already done. But Cormac. Declan hesitated. This is exactly what they want. They want you to react aggressively to prove that you're unstable, that the air situation has compromised your judgment. If you march to war right now, then I look strong, decisive. Cormac headed toward the war room, Declan following. The alternative is letting them think I'm too weak to defend my own territory. That's worse. Is it? Or is it smarter to let the council handle this? To show that you're willing to work within the system rather than above it. Cormac stopped, turned to face his counselor. You think I should do nothing, while my wolves are being murdered? I think you should be strategic, Declan said carefully. The delegation just gave you a second chance. Don't waste it by proving their critics right. Respond yes. Defend the borders, absolutely. But do it legally. Do it within the bounds of pack law. Show them you've learned from your mistakes. The wisdom of it grated against every instinct Cormac had. His pack was under attack. His authority was being challenged. Every fiber of his alpha nature screamed at him to respond with overwhelming force, to make an example of anyone who dared threaten what was his. But Declan was right. That's exactly what they wanted him to do. Fine, Cormac ground out. We respond legally. Double the border patrols. Send formal complaints to every neighboring alpha. Request council intervention for the unprovoked attack. And prepare our defenses in case they come back. Smart, Declan approved. And Cormac, keep the Omega and the air out of sight for the next few days. Don't give the traditionalists any more ammunition. Cormac wanted to argue, wanted to show that he wasn't ashamed of Aisling or Fiachra, wasn't hiding them away. But again, strategy won over instinct. I'll tell her, he said quietly. She won't like it. Neither will you. But you'll do it anyway, because you're learning to put your pack before your pride. The words stung, but they were meant to. Cormac dismissed Declan and went to find Aisling. She was in Fiachra's room, helping him practice standing with the aid of wooden supports the healers had built. The boy's face was scrunched in concentration, his thin legs trembling with effort, but he was standing. Actually standing, bearing his own weight for the first time in weeks. Mama, look. I'm doing it. Fiachra's voice was bright with pride. You are, baby. You're so strong. Aisling's face glowed with joy, and Cormac felt his heart crack watching them. He hated what he was about to do. Aisling, he said quietly. Can we talk? She looked up, and whatever she saw in his expression made her smile fade. Fiachra, let's take a break. Good work today. The boy settled back into his chair, exhausted but happy. Aisling guided Cormac out into the corridor. What's wrong? He told her. About the attack, the message, the political implications. Watched her face shift from shock to anger to that cold, bitter resignation he remembered from 3 years ago. So we're back in hiding, she said flatly. That's what you're telling me. Just for a few days. Just until the situation stabilizes. I need to show the council I'm handling this responsibly, and having you visible right now makes me look weak. Aisling's voice was sharp. Makes you look like you care about your Omega consort more than your pack? That's not. It's exactly what you're saying, Cormac. And it's exactly what you did 3 years ago. The moment keeping me around becomes inconvenient, you ask me to disappear. This is different. This is about safety. Safety. Aisling laughed bitterly. Whose safety? Mine. Fiachra's. Or your political position. Because I've heard this before. I've lived this before. And I'm not interested in being your dirty secret again. You're not a secret, Cormac insisted. The entire pack knows you're here. The council acknowledged you. I'm just asking you to stay out of public spaces for a few days while we handle a security crisis. That's reasonable. Reasonable for you, maybe. Aisling crossed her arms. But what you're really asking is for me to prove I know my place. To demonstrate that I won't embarrass you or complicate things. To be the good little Omega who stays hidden when the Alpha needs to look strong. That's not fair. Fair. Her voice rose. You want to talk about fair? I left my entire life behind to come back here. I'm living in your estate, under your authority, completely dependent on your protection. And the first time things get difficult, you're asking me to hide. To prove that I'm expendable. Again. You're not expendable, Cormac said desperately. You're essential. To Fiacra, to me, to everything that matters. But we're in a dangerous position right now, and I need time to. To what? To prove you're a strong Alpha who isn't controlled by his Omega. Aisling's eyes blazed. I've seen this play out before, Cormac. You prioritize your position over your family every single time. And I'm not going through that again. I'm not teaching our son that his mother is someone to be hidden away when she becomes inconvenient. Then what do you want me to do? Cormac's frustration finally broke through. Parade you around while my pack is under attack. Put you and Fiacra directly in the line of fire to make a political point. Because that's what you'd be doing. These wolves who attacked us, they specifically mentioned your bloodline, Aisling. They see you and Fiacra as contamination. If they come here, if they breach our defenses, you'll be their primary targets. That landed. He saw it in the way her anger faltered, replaced by fear. So this is about protecting us, she said slowly. Yes, Cormac breathed. This is about keeping you alive. Both of you. I can't defend the borders and protect you simultaneously if you're exposed. I need you somewhere secure, somewhere I don't have to worry about you every second. Please, Aisling. I'm not asking you to hide in shame. I'm asking you to let me keep you safe. The fight drained out of her. She sagged against the wall, suddenly exhausted. I hate this. I hate feeling like we're back to the beginning, like nothing's changed. Everything's changed, Cormac said quietly. He moved closer, close enough to touch but still leaving the choice to her. 3 years ago, I sent you away to protect my reputation. Today I'm asking you to stay safe to protect your life. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? But her voice lacked conviction now. No. Because 3 years ago, I let you leave and tried to forget you existed. Today I'm going to war to defend your right to be here. That's the difference. Aisling looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for truth. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she finally nodded. Okay. We'll stay in the family wing. But Cormac, if this becomes a pattern, if every crisis means I have to disappear, I'm taking Fiacra and leaving. Permanently. I won't live like that again. I understand, Cormac said. And he did. She was giving him one more chance. He couldn't afford to waste it. The next week was brutal. The attacks continued. Small raids, targeted killings, systematic terrorization of border settlements. Whoever was behind it had resources and coordination. This wasn't just Reardon acting alone. This was organized resistance from multiple traditional factions who saw Cormac's acceptance of Aisling as existential threat to their way of life. Cormac responded exactly as Declan advised. Legally, strategically, documenting every attack and sending detailed reports to the council. He reinforced defenses, called in allies, and made it clear he wouldn't be provoked into the kind of aggressive response his enemies wanted. But it was hard. Every report of casualties, every burned settlement, every terrified refugee, it all landed on his shoulders. And through it all, he could feel his authority eroding. His own wolves were starting to question whether his relationship with Aisling was worth this price. Whether maybe the traditionalists had a point. The breaking point came on the 8th day. A raid on a settlement just 5 miles from the main estate. 30 wolves killed, including children. The raiders left another message, this one even more explicit. Your Omega whore has brought divine judgment upon you. Send her away or watch your pack die. Cormac stood in the ruins of the settlement, surrounded by bodies, and felt his carefully maintained control shatter. This was his fault. Not because loving Aisling was wrong, but because he hadn't protected his people well enough. Hadn't anticipated how deep the hatred would run, how far his enemies would go. We march at dawn, he told Declan. Gather every warrior we have. We're ending this. Cormac, if you attack now. I don't care. Cormac's voice was dead calm. Alpha command absolute. They've killed children, Declan. Children. The council can sanction me, remove me, execute me for all I care. But I will not let these cowards hide behind pack law while they murder innocents. You'll be starting a civil war. They already started it. I'm just choosing to fight back. Word spread quickly. By nightfall, the entire pack knew. Their Alpha was going to war. The response was mixed. Some supported him, seeing his willingness to fight as proof of strength. Others were terrified, seeing the beginning of the collapse they'd feared. Aisling heard the news from Orlith, who came to the family wing with worry written across her face. He's going to do something stupid, the healer said bluntly. Something that will get him killed or deposed. You need to talk to him. He won't listen to me, Aisling said, though her heart was racing. I'm part of the problem. My presence is what's driving this. Your presence is the excuse they're using. The problem is much older and deeper. These traditionalists have been looking for a reason to challenge progressive alphas for years. You just gave them ammunition. But that doesn't mean you caused this. And it doesn't mean Cormac should throw his life away fighting it. Then what should he do? Aisling demanded. Let them keep killing his people. Let them terrorize the pack until everyone agrees I should leave. He should be smart, strategic. But he's not thinking clearly right now. He's thinking like a father who's terrified he'll lose his family, and like an alpha who's watching his authority crumble. That combination makes wolves do catastrophically stupid things. Orlith gripped Aisling's shoulders. You're the only one who can reach him. The only one whose opinion might matter more than his pride. Aisling found Cormac in the armory, strapping on battle gear with mechanical precision. His movements were too controlled, too careful, the kind of calm that preceded explosive violence. You're really doing this, she said from the doorway. He didn't look up. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. That's what you told me, remember? That was before they murdered 30 wolves. Before they burned children alive. His voice was hollow. I can't let that stand, Aisling. I won't. So you're going to march into their territory and do what? Kill them all. Start a war that will consume both our packs. Make Fiachra an orphan. She moved closer, forcing herself into his line of sight. Because that's what happens if you do this. You know it is. At least I'll have died protecting my people instead of cowering behind pack law while they're slaughtered. You won't be protecting them. You'll be giving the traditionalists exactly what they want. Proof that you're unstable, that your judgment is compromised, that you value revenge over your pack's well-being. They're baiting you, Cormac. Can't you see that? I see children's bodies, Cormac said flatly. I see settlements burned to ash. I see wolves who trusted me to keep them safe, dead because I was too worried about politics to act decisively. So act decisively now. Aisling grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop to look at her. But do it smart. Do it in a way that doesn't hand them everything they want. What do you suggest? His voice was sharp with sarcasm. Should I ask them nicely to stop? Send another formal complaint to the council? Wait for them to kill a few dozen more wolves before I'm allowed to respond? No. You should use me. Cormac went still. What? They're doing this because of me, right? Because my presence violates their precious traditions. Then let me be the solution. Aisling's voice was steady, though her heart was pounding. I'll go to them. Directly. I'll offer to meet with their leaders, to hear their grievances too. Absolutely not. Cormac's alpha command cracked through the air. You're not going anywhere near those murderers. Why not? If they want me gone, let them tell me why to my face. Let them explain to an Omega mother why her child deserves to grow up without her. Let them make their case publicly, where everyone can see the hatred behind their traditions. They'll kill you, Cormac said bluntly. Or worse. They'll take you hostage, use you against me, hurt you to prove a point. I won't allow it. It's not your decision. Aisling pulled away from him. I'm not your property, Cormac. I'm not something you get to control or protect without my input. And if my walking into their territory voluntarily can stop this war before it starts, then that's what I'm going to do. No. Cormac's voice was raw now, all the careful control shattering. No, Aisling, I can't. I can't lose you again. I just got you back. Fiachra just got his mother back. You can't ask me to let you walk into danger like this. I'm not asking permission. She met his eyes and hers were fierce. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can either help me do it safely with backup and protection, or I can go alone. But I'm going. They stared at each other, wills clashing, two stubborn wolves who'd both sacrificed everything and weren't willing to lose any more. There has to be another way, Cormac whispered. If there is, we haven't found it. And we're running out of time. Aisling softened slightly, reaching up to cup his face. Let me do this. Let me be brave for our son, the way you were brave when you brought me back. Sometimes the only way through fear is straight into it. Cormac closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Not surrender but acceptance. We do this my way, he said. With protection. With witnesses. With every precaution we can possibly take. And at the first sign of danger you retreat. Understood. Understood. And Aisling, if anything happens to you, if they hurt you in any way, there won't be a power in this world that can stop me from burning their territories to ash. Council be damned. She smiled sadly. I know. That's why I have to make sure nothing happens. The plan came together quickly. Aisling would request a formal parley with the traditionalist faction leaders, invoking ancient Omega rights to petition for her child's welfare. Cormac would accompany her with a small but elite guard. The meeting would take place on neutral ground, an old gathering site that belonged to no single pack. And most importantly, it would be witnessed by council observers, making any violence a direct violation of pack law. They won't agree to this, Declan said when Cormac outlined the plan. They want you to come to them with an army. They want the excuse to claim self-defense. Then we'll make it impossible for them to refuse, Cormac said. We'll send the invitation publicly through the council. We'll make it clear that if they refuse to meet with Aisling, they're admitting their grievances are baseless. That they're just using her as an excuse for violence. It's risky, Orlith said. But it might work. Traditionalists care deeply about honor, about being seen as righteous. If you back them into a corner where refusing makes them look cowardly, they'll have to show up, Cormac finished. And once we're all in the same room, talking instead of killing, maybe we can find a solution that doesn't end in war. The invitation was sent. The response came within hours. The traditionalist faction would meet, but only if Aisling came without armed escort. No, Cormac said immediately when he read it. Absolutely not. It's what we expected, Aisling said calmly. They want to prove they're not afraid of one Omega. Fine. Let them. You'll be completely vulnerable. I'll be protected by parley law. If they harm me during a formal peace negotiation, every Alpha in the territory will turn against them. They know that. She took his hand. Trust me, Cormac. I know how to talk to traditionalists. I grew up among them, remember? I know what they fear, what they value, what arguments might actually reach them. I still don't like this. You don't have to like it. You just have to let me try. The meeting was set for 3 days hence. Those 3 days were the longest of Cormac's life. He spent them preparing for every possible disaster, drilling his warriors on rescue scenarios, mapping every entrance and exit of the neutral ground. He barely slept, barely ate, just paced and planned and tried not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. Aisling spent the time with Fiachra, explaining to him in the simplest terms that she was going to talk to some people who were angry, that she would be back soon, that he needed to be brave while she was gone. "Why are they angry at you, Mama?" Fiachra asked, his blue eyes too wise for his age. "Because they don't understand that love is more important than rules," Aisling said gently. "But I'm going to help them understand." "What if they don't want to understand?" "Then we'll find another way." She kissed his forehead. "But Mama always comes back to you, baby. Always. Remember that." The morning of the meeting dawned cold and gray. Cormac wanted to accompany Aisling to the neutral ground, but the terms were explicit. She arrived alone or not at all. So he could only watch from the estate gates as she rode out, small and determined on her horse, heading toward a meeting that could end in peace or in her death. "She'll be fine," Orlith said beside him, though her voice lacked conviction. "She's stronger than any of us give her credit for." "She's the bravest person I've ever known," Cormac said quietly. "And I might have just sent her to die." The neutral ground was an ancient stone circle, weathered and sacred. Aisling dismounted outside it and walked into the center alone. Her heart pounding but her steps steady. Around the circle's perimeter she could see them, a dozen traditionalist alphas, all male, all radiating hostility. At their head stood Reardon. Course it was him. "You came," he said, sounding almost surprised. "You invited me," Aisling replied. "Or do traditionalists not honor their own parley requests?" A few of the alphas shifted uncomfortably at that. But shame was a powerful tool. "We honor our word," Reardon said stiffly. "Which is more than can be said for your alpha. He swore a blood oath to keep you exiled. He broke it. Because his son was dying," Aisling said simply. "Because pack law was killing an innocent child. And when a law causes that kind of harm, it's the law that's broken, not the people who violate it." "You speak as though you have the right to judge our laws," another alpha, an older wolf with scars crossing his face, spoke up. "You're Omega, servant class. Your opinion on pack law is irrelevant." "My opinion on my own child is not," Aisling shot back. "And that's what this is really about, isn't it? Not pack law, not tradition, not even alpha authority. It's about whether an Omega mother has the right to raise her own son. It's about contamination," Reardon said coldly. "About keeping bloodlines pure. About maintaining the hierarchy that has kept our packs strong for centuries. Your child is an abomination. Alpha and Omega blood mixed in ways that should never happen. He's disabled, weak, a sign of divine disapproval." "My child," Aisling interrupted, her voice steel, "is strong, brave, intelligent. Yes, his legs don't work the way yours do. Yes, his words come harder than other children's. But those are physical facts, not moral judgments. He's not weak because he's disabled. He's not an abomination because his parents loved each other. He's just a little boy who deserves to grow up with his mother. And if your traditions say otherwise, then your traditions are cruel." "Cruel?" The scarred alpha laughed harshly. "We're trying to save the pack from degeneracy, from the slow erosion of everything that makes us strong. You think love justifies breaking every rule? Next it'll be humans mixing with wolves, predators bonding with prey. Where does it end?" "It ends," Aisling said, "with people being allowed to love who they love and raise their children in peace. That's not degeneracy. That's basic decency. And the fact that you can't see the difference is exactly why your time is ending." "Our time?" Reardon stepped closer to the circle's edge. "You think you've won? That bringing your Omega wiles to this meeting will somehow change centuries of tradition? You're delusional." "Maybe," Aisling agreed. "Or maybe I understand something you don't. Change is coming whether you fight it or not. The younger generations don't believe Omega blood is contamination. They don't see disability as divine judgment. They want a pack where strength is measured by courage and compassion, not bloodline purity. And you're on the wrong side of that change. Then we'll die on the right side, Reardon said. Before we let people like you destroy everything we've built. People like me, Aisling repeated. Omega mothers who love their children. That's who you're willing to die fighting. That's the hill you've chosen. Silence. Several of the alphas looked uncomfortable now, unwilling to meet her eyes. I came here, Aisling continued, because I thought maybe we could find common ground. Maybe I could help you see that my son isn't a threat to your way of life. He's just a child who needs his mother. But I see now that this was never about Fiacra. It was never even about me. This is about your fear that the world is changing and leaving you behind. And you're right to be afraid. 'Cause it is changing. And you can either change with it or get swept away. But either way, I'm not leaving my son. So if you want to keep fighting, keep killing innocent wolves to prove your point, go ahead. But know that every drop of blood you spill makes your cause look more monstrous and ours look more righteous. You're losing this war not because we're stronger, but because we're right. She turned to leave, done with this farce of a negotiation. Wait. The voice came from the back, a younger alpha who'd been silent until now. What would you have us do? Just accept that everything we believe is wrong. Aisling turned back. No. I'd have you question whether what you believe actually serves the pack, or just serves your pride. I'd have you look at my son and ask yourself if he really deserves to grow up motherless because of rules made by wolves who've been dead for generations. I'd have you imagine what the pack could be if we measured worth by character instead of bloodline. That's all. Just question. That's where change starts. The young alpha nodded slowly. Several others looked thoughtful. But Riordan's face was twisted with rage. You haven't convinced anyone, Omega. You've just proven how dangerous you are. Coming here with your words and your appeals to emotion, trying to corrupt our youngest with your propaganda. You need to be removed. Permanently. He moved toward the circle and Aisling's heart seized. This was it. The moment where parley law either held or shattered. Stop. The scarred alpha's voice cracked like thunder. Parley law, Reardon. She came in peace. She leaves in peace. That's sacred. Sacred. Reardon whirled on him. Since when do you care about sacred law? You've been killing her alpha's wolves for weeks. In war, yes. But this is parley. And I won't violate that, even for this. The scarred alpha looked at Aisling, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. You're right, that change is coming. Doesn't mean I like it. Doesn't mean I'll stop fighting it. But I won't kill an Omega under parley protection. That's not tradition, that's just murder. Then you're as weak as she is, Reardon spat. Or maybe I'm just old enough to know which fights are worth dying for. The scarred alpha turned his back on Reardon. Go, Omega. Before he decides his hate is worth more than his honor. Aisling didn't need to be told twice. She walked out of the circle with as much dignity as she could muster, mounted her horse and rode. Behind her, she could hear arguing, Riordan's fury meeting resistance from his own faction. The seed of doubt had been planted. Might not be enough. Might not stop the violence. But it was something. She made it halfway back to the estate before the tears came. Not from fear, though she'd been terrified the entire time, but from relief. She'd faced them. Spoken her truth. And she was alive to return to her son. Cormac met her at the gates, pulling her from her horse before she'd even fully stopped, crushing her against his chest with desperate strength. Never again, he breathed into her hair. Never again, Aisling. I can't go through that again. It worked, she said, her voice muffled against his chest. Not completely, but enough. Some of them are questioning now. Some of them looked ashamed. We might have a chance. I don't care. I don't care if it worked. The cost was too high. I stood here for 3 hours imagining every way they could hurt you, and I nearly went mad. Promise me you won't do that again. I can't promise that. Aisling pulled back to look at him. If it needs to be done, I'll do it. That's what being a parent means. Being willing to walk into fire for your child. Then we walk together, Cormac said fiercely. No more solo missions. No more sacrifices. We face everything as a family or not at all. Deal. She kissed him then, quick and desperate and real. Now take me to our son. I promised him I'd come back. Fiachra was waiting in his room, and the relief on his small face when Aisling entered nearly broke her. He launched himself toward her with his uneven gait, and she caught him, lifting him despite the protest of her tired muscles. Mama came back, he whispered against her neck. You promised. Always, baby. Always. That night, as they put Fiachra to bed together, both of them a family ritual they were still learning, Cormac allowed himself to hope. The traditionalists were fracturing. Aisling's words had reached at least some of them. And the violence, while not stopped completely, had slowed. Maybe they would survive this after all. The next morning brought a new development, a formal request from the scarred Alpha, whose name they learned was Fergus, to meet with Cormac. Alone. No weapons. No witnesses. It's a trap, Declan said immediately. Maybe, Cormac agreed. Or maybe Aisling actually got through to him. Either way I have to know. Then let me come with you. No, he specified alone. If I show up with backup, I prove I don't trust his honor. That destroys any chance of alliance. Cormac looked at Aisling at Fiachra playing nearby. But if I don't come back by nightfall, take them and run. Get as far from here as possible. Promise me. Don't talk like that, Aisling said, but her face was pale. Promise me. I promise. The meeting place was a clifftop overlooking the border between territories. Fergus was already there when Cormac arrived, standing alone as promised. His posture relaxed but alert. Alpha Cormac, he greeted. Thank you for coming. You asked. I'm here. What do you want? To propose a truce, Fergus said bluntly. Not between our entire factions. I don't have that authority. But between my wolves and yours. A cessation of violence while we figure out what comes next. Cormac studied him carefully. Why? Yesterday you were arguing for tradition. Yesterday I hadn't heard your Omega speak. Fergus shook his head. She's right, you know. About the change coming. About us being on the wrong side of it. I've spent my life fighting to preserve traditions I didn't create, and I never stopped to ask if they were worth preserving. Your mate made me ask. Made me think about my own grandchildren, what kind of pack I want them to inherit. And I'm not sure anymore that blood purity matters as much as I thought it did. You're willing to admit that? Cormac asked. To break with Reardon and the others. I'm willing to stop killing over it, Fergus corrected. I still think you made mistakes. Still think you handled this badly. But I also think your son deserves his mother. And your mate earned my respect by walking into that circle knowing we could kill her. That takes courage I'm not sure I possess. She's braver than both of us combined, Cormac agreed quietly. Then honor that courage by accepting this truce. Let me go back to my faction and try to convince the others. Give us time to debate this properly, without blood clouding the discussion. And if they refuse, if Reardon keeps pushing for violence, then I'll fight with you instead of against you, Fergus said. Because she was right about something else too. Some fights aren't worth dying for. And killing children over bloodline purity. That's not honor. That's just hate wearing tradition's mask. Cormac extended his hand. Truce then. Until the full council gathering. We'll let them decide this properly. Fergus clasped his hand, and the deal was done. The weeks that followed were tense but peaceful. The violence stopped. The traditionalist faction fractured further, roughly half following Fergus toward accommodation, the other half following Reardon deeper into extremism. And through it all, Fiachra continued to improve. He was speaking in full sentences now. His physical therapy progressing steadily. He'd never walk normally, the healers were clear about that. But he was learning to navigate the world on his own terms, with his mother's patient support and his father's fierce pride. And slowly, carefully, Cormac and Aisling rebuilt what they'd lost. It wasn't the same as before. There was too much pain, too much betrayal to simply erase. But it was real, honest, built on shared purpose instead of secret passion. They were learning to be partners instead of just lovers. Parents before everything else. The full council gathering loomed, just 2 weeks away now, and everyone knew it would be the final reckoning. The traditionalists would make their case. Cormac would make his. And the assembled alphas would decide whether change was possible or if the old ways would hold. But for now, in this moment, standing in their son's room watching him show his father a drawing he'd made, 3 stick figures labeled Mama, Father, and Me, Cormac allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Oh, fragile, terrifying, but real. The story ends here, at least for now. On a cliffhanger of sorts, with the council gathering ahead, with Riordan's extremists still lurking, with everything balanced on a knife's edge. But also with a family finally together. With a child thriving instead of fading. With 2 parents who'd learned that love was worth fighting for, even when the whole world said it shouldn't be. And with the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together.